When you hear the word God's providence, what comes to mind? What do you think that means, God's providence? Maybe you think it means that God is in control all the time. Maybe you think that God is sovereign. Where if you said those things, you are correct. But a good definition of God's providence is this: God uses all things to fulfill his purposes. God even uses evil things to fulfill his purpose for his glory and for our own good. So what does that mean? Even when evil happens in our lives, God is still in control. When evil happens in our lives, God can take that evil situation that he did not cause and use it for his glory and our good. A couple of Bible verses that come to mind is Romans 8:28. God causes all things to work together for those who love the Lord and for those who are called according to his purpose. Genesis 50 verse 20. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. And lastly, Proverbs 16:4. The Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. That means no matter what happens to us, good or bad, God is provident. God is in control. Stay tuned, and we're going to see how God's providence works in the life of Joseph. Hello, welcome to the Sunday School lesson with Reverend Dr. John W. Wilson III. Our lesson for this week is titled Revealed Love. Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 8 and 10 through 15. Before we get into our lesson for today, I want to remind you to hit the share button, hit the like button if you find out this lesson is a blessing to you. If you're on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. I would like for this lesson to reach as many people as possible. And guess what? I really need your help. So let's get into our lesson. It's called Revealed Love. As I did in my introduction, it really speaks to God's providence. And what can we learn from Joseph's life is that when we go through bad things, when terrible things happen to us, we have to remember, and what will keep us strong and faithful is that God is in control. He can take a bad situation, a bad event in our lives, and turn it for his glory and our own good. So no matter what you're going through right now, if it's terrible, if it's bad, it's the worst day of your life, give it to God. God will turn that situation for his glory and for your own good. Keep believing that. So let's get into our lesson. We are at chapter 45. Some events have happened leading up into that. Last time we talked about Joseph. They don't know who he is. They don't recognize him. He recognizes them. He asked them to go and get their son Benjamin. And then Simon's going to stay behind as collateral. If they don't bring back Benjamin, then they'll never see Simon again. And so the other brothers go get Benjamin. They convince Jacob that they must take him back. Judah pledges his own life that all my life I will take care of him. I will make sure nothing happens to him. And so Jacob reluctantly agrees. They need food. They need all these things. He reluctantly agrees, sends Benjamin. Joseph now sees all of his brothers there. His 11 brothers are there. he loads them up with food, and he sneaks a silver cup into the pouch of Benjamin. And then as they leave and they get a certain distance, he sends his man to go and stop them and search their bags. And the brothers swear up and down that they have done nothing wrong. They're innocent. And they said that if we've done anything wrong, we will be your servants, meaning that we'll be enslaved to you. And so as they search in the bag, they find a silver cup in Benjamin's pouch. They are dismayed, they're confused, they don't know what to think. So they all come back. And then they're sitting before Joseph. And Joseph says, I will not punish everybody, but I will keep the one who had the silver cup, Benjamin, and he will be my servant. Judah steps up and speaks out and says, I will take his place. He says, makes the argument, we were only doing what you said. You had told us to get our younger brother. We wouldn't got a younger brother. We brought him back, and now this has happened. We've done nothing wrong. Then he makes the argument that our older father, our father who is elderly, advanced in ages, it would break his heart that his son of his wife would not come back. In fact, he would go into depression. He would in fact wish he was dead or be on the brink of death himself. He pleads and pleads and pleads and say, I will take his place. And this is where we're at right now. They are sitting in a room, and Joseph has accused Benjamin of being a thief. Judah has just made his pledge, and it touches the heart of Joseph. It was unexpected. He didn't know that would come out of them, but it pleases him because he can see the forgiveness and the love that they have for Benjamin, even though Benjamin is now the favorite of his dad, Jacob. They have accepted that reality, and they have forgiven or don't hold it against Benjamin for that, nor do they hold it against their father. They have accepted it, and they have moved on, and they still love their father. So 45 tells us, after it says this, then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. In this room, Joseph and his servants were there. And Joseph is emotional. He's crying, he's weeping. So he tells them to clear the room, and it's just Joseph and his brothers. He says right here, he cried, make everyone go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He had reached the point where he could not hold it even more. God had brought him to the point where it's time to reveal himself to his brothers so they can be one family as they were before, and all sorts of forgiveness can take place. The trials and the testing is over. Now it's time for Joseph to reveal himself and put this trials and testing to an end. This is what has happened before this is called a dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is that when we have read the story of Joseph, and then when he's enslaved, we see his life. We hear about the lives of Jacob and the 11 brothers. And as we progress in the story, Joseph's brothers don't really know what's going on in the life of Joseph. Joseph doesn't know what's going on in the life of his brothers. We see the scheme of, or not the scheme, but the trials and the testing of Joseph. The brothers don't know what's going on. Now, as we come here, the dramatic irony is everybody is going to know what's going on. Before then, only the reader knew exactly what was going on. Now the climax is coming. Everything is going to come out in the open. Now everybody, the reader, the characters in the story, all know what's going to happen. Here it goes. And Joseph wept aloud. He's crying uncontrollably. His emotion. He's had he's missed his brothers. He had all this. He yearned to know about his brothers. All this emotion, all being around them, all this love that he has for them is now pouring itself out. He wept out loud so that the Egyptians heard it. Before then, Joseph was reserved, composed. But now he can no longer, what Judah said, touched his heart. Now he's welling out so loud. Not only did the Egyptian hear it, but the household of Pharaoh heard it. Meaning that everybody that in hearing distance heard this crying. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father alive? Can you imagine what the 11 brothers thought when they said, I am Joseph? They still haven't recognized him. Joseph has a shaved head like mine, no facial hair. He's dressed up in Egyptian royal attire. He looks like an Egyptian. He speaks the Egyptian language. Now he's speaking the Hebrew language. And now this person who they have been around and yet do not recognize says, I am Joseph. I believe that in addition to them having a hard time recognizing him, I believe that God supernaturally closed their eyes and prevented them from recognizing Joseph. It would be hard to believe if I grew up with my brother, and yes, I hadn't seen him in 20 years, and yet I spent a lot of time around him, I would not recognize him. So I believe that God blinded their eyes so they could not recognize him for his sovereign purpose. Okay? So here, he says, I am Joseph, and they're saying in their minds, Joseph who? The farthest thing I believe from their mind was Joseph, the brother who they firmly believed that was dead. I am Joseph. Is my father alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. They didn't know what to think. In their mind, could it be Joseph, our brother, or is this some other kind of Joseph? Is it another Joseph that we don't know about, speaking about his father that we should know, but we don't know? I think they're dismayed and confused, and they're saying it could not possibly be Joseph. That's the farthest thing from their mind. They hadn't seen him in over 20 years. The last place they thought they would see him, if they were to see him, would be an Egyptian ruler, second in command, giving all these types of commands. So this is what Joseph said. They still don't recognize him. They're still not sure who he is. Joseph said in verse 4, so Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. He said, basically, you're away from me. Come near to me. Get a closer look. Come around me and check out for yourself and look at me hard, and you'll know that it's me. And they came near. And he said, he identifies himself again. I am your brother. He doesn't say I am Joseph. I am your brother Joseph. Now he gets more specific. Whom you sold into Egypt. He is not saying that to get at him or to be mean and vindictive or to put them on the defensive. He's using terms to help them recognize who he is and identify to them who he is. I am your brother. I'm not any other Joseph. I'm your brother Joseph, the one that you sold into slavery in Egypt. And he goes right here. Now he knows. They know who he is. They now look at him. Their eyes are open. They begin to recognize him. They've heard that Joseph just said, you sold me into slavery. They don't know if, except for Benjamin, they don't know if he's going to do something to him, attack him, imprison, enact some type of vengeance or something like that. They don't know what's going to happen. They have this guilt in their heart. When we do bad things to people, if we have any type of conscience, we carry around a guilt. And the Bible tells us they've been carrying around this guilt for 22 years. God never took it away from them. And sometimes, most of the time, God allows us to have guilt and not let it go away from us so that we can reconcile this type of guilt with forgiveness. If we could quickly pass over guilt, then there would be no reason for forgiveness. If we could quickly pass over guilt, our heart would become hardened and there would be no reconciliation. But God allowed this guilt, this burden that they had to carry for 22 years, he's bringing it to a close, to a climax, so it can be resolved. And sometimes God does that in our own lives. We've had enough of this guilt. We cannot carry it anymore. We are tired of carrying this type of guilt. It is painful. It is drudgery. It's messing with our lives. It's affecting our happiness and our joy. And God says enough is enough. I'm gonna make that situation or that person come in contact with you, and that issue is going to be resolved. And that's what happens here. And so he says here, whom you sold to, and do not be distressed, or angry. I don't want you to be stressful. I don't want you to be depressed. I don't want you to feel bad. I don't want you to feel like I'm going to do something to you. I don't want you to worry. I don't want you to be angry with yourselves about what you have done. Or don't be angry because you sold me here. He's freeing them up. He says, look, yes, you sold me into slavery, but I do not want you to be distressed, distraught, to worry, to feel bad. I don't want you to be angry with yourself. He is saying that because during those 20 years, Joseph has learned about God's providence. Joseph has learned that God is in control of all things. He is sovereign of everything. God can take what is bad things that have happened to us, all the evil that has been done to us. God can take that situation, use it for his own glory, praises to his name, and at the same time, make some kind of good come out of it for us. Look what Joseph says. He says God 4 times in our passage. He says here, for God. That lets us know that Joseph, the situation that happened to him, he looks back and he had 22 years to think about what has happened to him, especially those 13 years. He saw how God worked in his life, used the good and bad in his life to bring him where he is, and he is thankful. Because he's thankful for what God has done, because he understands God's providence, he is quickly and easily forgive those who have wronged him, his brothers. He says, for God sent me before you to preserve your life. In other words, he said, all these things happened to me in order for this day to happen, in order for me to preserve your life, to save you. This is why God did it. And I know that God did this, and that's why I have no animosity towards you. I have nothing but praises to God. Look at God. God has allowed me to go through what I went through for this very purpose, and that's to preserve life. For the famine has been in this land these 2 years. The famine is in the 2nd year of 7 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither. In other words, we're just beginning in this famine. If you think it's bad now, add another 5 years or go through another 5 years and you'll see how bad it really gets. He says right here, there are yet 5 years which there will neither be plowing or harvest. Nothing will grow. There will be no reaping and sowing. If there's no reaping and sowing, there will be no harvest. There will be no food for people to eat. So God has raised me up or sent me before you to preserve life. Not only your life, but lives of many other people. Joseph can see God working in his life. He can see it. He said, yes, I've had bad times, but God, through adversity, has raised me up, strengthened me, allowed me to go through things for this very purpose, that I would be the governor in Egypt, second in command over the Pharaoh's household, over all of his land, and second to him only in rulership. He says, and then he uses God again. He uses for God first, Then he says, and God sent me before you to preserve for a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. Look what God has told him. Look what he sees. God has sent me before you. Not only has he sent me to preserve life, he sent me before you so that you can be a remnant, so that the Jewish people can continue and not die in this famine, so that you can survive this famine, you and your household, so that you can be kept alive. You know, when you know your purpose and when you know what God has done in your life and when you know what God is doing in your life, it can be easy to forgive. When you understand God's providence, that he's in control of everything, that he is sovereign, you can trust him. And when things happen to you, good or bad, you keep them in the right perspective and you keep on trusting God. Joseph has learned a lot through adversity. My question to you is that what are you learning through your adversity? What are you learning through your difficult times? Look back in your life and see what you had to go through. How has that made you a better person? How has that made you understand and know God better? How has that made you appreciate what God is doing in your life that much better? God, right now, if you're trusting God, God has you right where he wants you. He has a purpose for you. All those bad things are not in vain. They are to make you a better person, to at least help somebody else. Like Joseph, help preserve life. Help to preserve a remnant. What is God saving you for in order to help somebody else? What does he want from you? So he has here, keep alive for many survivors. That is key. So it was not you, God's providence. This is God. God is in control. God is orchestrating. God is ordering the steps. The devil may try to sidetrack you or bring people into your harm's way, but God can take that bad thing and in spite of it, put you in the right track, bring him glory and bring you good. Look what he says. So it was not you who sent me here. God sent me to Egypt. You thought you sent me here. You thought you sold me in slavery, but God used that evil deed to get me where he wanted me to be. He has made, look what he said, you thought you were hurting me, but he has made me a father to the Pharaoh. I am the Pharaoh's #1 advisor. I am his trusted advisor. I'm the one that he listens to most. I am the only second to him. Whatever I say, he does. Whatever I say, he listens to me. And Lord, I'm the Lord of all of his house. I run his household. You may have thought you were selling me into Egypt, but God took that, raised me up. I'm the father of Pharaoh. I'm the Lord of his household. I am the governor of all the land of Egypt. Don't feel bad. That's what he's not trying to rub it in. He's not trying to taunt them. He's saying, don't feel bad. Yes, what you did, and it was wrong. But in the big picture of things, in the big scheme of things, in God's master plan, he is the one who sent me here, not you. He sent me here so that he can raise me up, that I can save the lives of many in my family. Verse 9, which is not in our lesson, but it says, hurry up, go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God, look at God again, God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Look, when you go through adversity and God takes you out of adversity, if you're wise, if you're smart, if you truly understand God's providence, you will not be saying, I did this and I did this. You will be giving glory all to God. And this is what Joseph does. When he was 17, it was all about I. What I got. When he's in his close to 40, it is what God has done in his life. Is what God has done in his life. What God has done. What God has done. How God has blessed me. God, that's the way it should be. Can you say what God has done in your life? God has made me this. God has given me this. God has sent me here. God has put me in this position. Can you say that? Fill in the blank. It says, God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. He is singing praises to God. He's not taunting them. He's not bragging. He is giving God the glory. In the midst of a bad situation, bad to him, at the end of this trial, Joseph gives glory to God. He says, come down to me, do not tarry. So he's telling, go get Jacob. Tell him what God has done for me, and go get him in a hurry and bring him now. Verse 10, you shall dwell in the land of Goshen. Now, I have a place for you. Goshen was a pasture. It was a perfect for shepherds. You have to remember the Hebrews were shepherds. The Egyptians hated shepherds. They were low on the totem pole. But in Jacob's family, shepherding was grand, and Goshen was a place that was ripe for shepherding. Nothing but grassland, nothing but flat land, nothing but pasturing. And here Joseph tells it is close to him. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen. They will be taken care of, very comfortable. And you shall be near me. You're going to be near to me. We're going to get this thing together. We're going to make up for lost time. We're going to spend time with each other. You and your children and your children's children. Your children and your grandchildren. We will all live together. I will not have you intermingling with the Egyptians. I will not have our children's children marrying the Egyptians. We're going to stay pure. Because in reality, God has them in Goshen for a place. And I'm going to give you a little hint. The problem that happened is that the people of Israel, this Jacob's family, got too comfortable in Goshen. They did not want to leave Egypt, and God had to enslave them for 400 years to the point that they cried out and asked to be let out of Egypt. That's much down the road. But for right now, this is supposed to be a temporary dwelling. They're supposed to go back to Canaan and start living there, but they don't. It says, in your flocks and your herds and all that you have, he's going to set them up. I'm going to set you up. I'm going to set you up. You are going to be taken care of. You're going to be all right. So tell him, I know it's going to be, he headed to leave. Doesn't want to leave his homeland. Doesn't want to pick up and leave. You know how you get older, you don't want to leave and everything? But he's telling them, if you leave, life will be better. If you stay where you are, you'll be stricken by the famine. But if you come here where you are, you'll have plenty of food to eat, plenty of water. You'll be near me, and you'll be well taken care of. Not only you, but your children's children, and all your livestock, and all of your cattle. He says, 11, there I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine. Things are going to get worse. Tell him things are going to get worse. They're going to get harder. It's not going to be a typical famine that lasts 1 or 3 years and everything is fine. This thing is lasting 7 years, and you're only in the beginning of it. This is the worst famine that you'll ever see. So come on. Things are good. Come on and live and not die. It says, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. You stay there, you're going to be poor. You stay there, you're going to go hungry. You stay there, you're going to have needs. You stay there, you're going to regret it. You're going to wish you were somewhere else. He said, verse 12, and now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see. That is, it is my mouth that speaks this to you. Meaning I'm your Joseph, your brother, Jacob's son, speaking this to you. That means you can believe me. I'm not Pharaoh saying this to you. And it is Joseph, your brother. And you can see with your eyes. Tell him, Joseph said this. Joseph, your son, said this. And believe him. And he will make good on what he says. You must, 13, you must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt. Tell him how well I'm doing. And all that you have seen. Tell him how things are good here. Hurry and bring my father down here. Joseph wants a family reunion. He wants his family back. He's missed him for over 22 years. He wants him back. And he wants to take care of him. Because that's part of the reason why God exalted him to this position. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. He cried. And Benjamin wept back. And he kissed all of his brothers. Kiss was an affection. It was everything as far as a makeup. It was telling them, I love you. And wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. Then they talked about what's caught up in old times. How many children do you have? Who's your wife? These are my children. What do your children look like? How's it been those many years? What you been up to? What have I missed? Who's this? Who's that? Who's that? How many do you have? How many grandchildren do you have? What's my father doing? How's he holding up? They talked and they reminisced and they got to know each other again. And so here we have, what do we have in this lesson here? In our lesson. Talks about forgiveness. Joseph gives us an example of God's forgiveness, what it looks like. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you forget what happened. No, he did not forget what happened, nor did they forget what they did. But he did not hold it against them. Meaning that he did not exact vengeance upon them. He did not throw it up in their face. He did not mistreat them because of what they did to him. He completely forgave them. And he forgave them because he had God's perspective on things. What he went through made him a better person. What he went through made him trust God even more. What he went through, God used it to make him the man and the leader and the ruler that he is today. What he went through, all the adversity, just being lonely. You know he had to be lonely. He's a foreigner in a Jew in a foreign land. He's a Jew in an Egyptian land. He has nobody like him. So when you're alone, guess what happens? You only can trust God. You get to know God pretty well, and he did. So in a sense, he didn't like what happened to him, but he treasured what happened to him because he can look back and see what God has done in his life and can see how he is better for it. Can you look back in your life and see some of the bad things you went through or people have done to you, but you're better for it? Can you see a person and still not have anger and resentment towards them? Can you see somebody who's done something to you and not want to strike out to them? And stay? I'm not saying you have to be their best friend. I'm not saying you got to be touchy-touchy and all that, but can you not hold it against them for what they've done to you? Can you take something that is bad and somehow, through God's grace, make it something that is good in your life? Joseph says in verse 20, in chapter 50, verse 20, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Can you see the good in some of the bad things that happened to you? Got to know God better. I'm a better man. I'm a better father. What I've gone through has made me a better father to my children. What I've gone through has made me a better husband to my wife. What I've gone through has allowed me to help other people. What I have gone through has allowed me to easily forgive somebody else. What I've gone through has allowed me to help those in need, the homeless. What I've gone through has allowed me to help those who suffer injustice. Take something that is bad in your life and through prayer and through the grace of God, somehow allow it to turn into something good in your life. Good in your life. And the main thing, Joseph teaches how to forgive and not carrying that guilt and that burden. And here, God uses extreme examples. This is one of the worst things Joseph had to him that could happen to anybody else. To be sold into slavery by those you love. To be thrown into a pit. To be lied upon and you go back and tell your father that he died. That's a terrible thing. And then he goes and he's sold into slavery. Then he works very hard in Potiphar's house. A trustworthy servant, done everything right. And then only to have Potiphar's wife lie upon him and said he tried to rape her. There's a book called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. in this book says that God is loving, but he's not sovereign. God is sovereign, but he's not all powerful. Doesn't deny God's love and sovereign, but they said, but God is not all powerful. And the reason why the book says, I know he's not all powerful, because things are chaos. Things are out of control. So how can a loving God be out of control? But the issue, what he doesn't understand, is that Joseph tells us that even though things look out of control to us, they are exactly going to according to plan in God's providence. God is taking something bad and chaotic and using it for his glory and using it for our own good. So from Potiphar's house, an injustice happens to Joseph. He innocently goes to prison. He interprets two dreams for two different people. The dreams come true. One dies, one goes back to the Pharaoh's circle, the cupbearer, and he forgets about him. Look at all these bad things, and he stays in prison another 2 years. Until something bad happens or about to happen, the king has a dream, and then he calls him. So God uses Joseph's life to give us an extreme example of why we need to forgive and why we need to trust God, and that God can bring us out of any situation so that we can have peace and joy. Well, I hope this lesson has been a tremendous blessing to you. It has been fantastic to me. I love Joseph. I think he's underrated. I think more boys' names should be Joseph. I think we should study him more, because we can learn how to persevere in the midst of doing something that something is bad to us. We can still excel on our job. We can still trust God. We can still have character. We can still have a good work ethic. Our situation does not have to define us, because we're leaning on God and we're trusting God's providence. And God will never let us down. Everybody have a great Sunday. Have a great Sunday school. I will see you next week. I love you. I love you much. God bless you.